and I want to begin with the first word, tension. Tension. And I want to do that by telling two stories about a similar situation. There's a man that enters a plane. It's flying from LAX to New York. And I'm not sure how high a plane has to go to make that happen, but are we... Oh, that's the old series. Yeah. I'll tell you what, just leave it right there. Just leave it right there, because I have no idea where I'm going to go this morning after that. Perfect. There you go, Lyle. There you go. You're off the hook. So Lyle this is his third week doing the computer. I think we should give him a hand that he's willing to take the time to do that. So if anyone says, boy, why isn't that being fixed, Lyle would sure love to have some company back there if you want to learn how to fix that. So we have two guys. They're going to fly from LAX to New York. And so they get on this plane. And the first guy's sitting in his seat, and the flight seems to be going okay. Everything seems to be fine. And he notices that he seems pretty comfortable. Life's okay. Life's doing its thing. And the stewardess comes up to him and walks up to him and just kind of says, "Sir, I just wanted to let you know that underneath your seat is it's a device that we like to use. If something were to possibly happen, you could put this over your shoulders, and some people call it a parachute, but that's a really old term. We don't really want to use those terms. But it's just something, and I'll tell you what, you put this on, and I guarantee you, your flight between here and New York will be one of the best flights you've ever had. In fact, you think you're doing good now. Wait till you put on this little contraption, put it on your back, and you sit down, and I guarantee you, it'll be the most wonderful flight you've ever had. It'll be, you'll tell your friends about it. It'll be something that really does, what's the word we want to use here at our special flight school? We like to say that this is going to make your flight superb without any problems. Well, the man hears this and he's like, well, how can I turn down such an offer? It's underneath my seat. How lucky am I to have such an opportunity? And so he takes this thing and he puts it on his shoulders, and he's sitting there on the plane, and he recognizes the fact that he's one of the very few people that are actually wearing this. And as he's wearing it, he realizes it's a little bulky, and that he can't really lean back in his seat now. It's kind of pushed forward a little bit. In fact, it's pushed so forward that his face he can almost smell the fabric of the seat that's in front of him, which is not that great of a smell. And so he's pressed there, and he's looking around, and he can feel himself kind of getting annoyed because he was really doing well before, but now that he has this thing on, it's just quite a bit different now. It's a little harder, and he realizes that people are staring at him, looking at him like, what is that guy doing wearing this? And he's like, oh, hey, listen, this is really the best thing. In fact, if I were you, I'd put one of these on. They're like, well, you don't look comfortable at all. He's like, oh, no, I love this. This is great. The whole time he's lying because he was doing way better before. Well, the stewardess, the same one that told him to put on his this gear, comes by with her tray, and the tray happens to have hot coffee on top of it. And as she's pushing the tray by, the plane hits some massive turbulence. The craft of coffee shoots off of the thing, the lid comes off and lands right on this man's lap. Now, he's already a bit irritated by this whole thing that he was told to put on that was supposed to make his flight so much better, and it hasn't. And now this hot coffee has fallen on his lap. It's scalded him. He gets up. He's so mad at this whole situation. He takes the thing off and he throws it down on the ground. He says, you know what? You can take this whole whatever you want to call it thing. You said it was supposed to enhance my life. This is going to be a superb flight. But instead, this whole thing has been a joke. I don't want it. I'm not wearing it. You can have enough of it. He takes it, throws it in the aisle, kicks it down the aisle, sits down, arms around the thing. Says, the last thing God's greatest I'm going to do is listen to any steward again that's going to tell me to be putting on anything like this. I tried it. It didn't work for me. Second guy gets on a plane between LAX and New York City. Sitting on his plane, and flight's going well, everything's going great, and he just minding his own business, just like the first guy. Stewardess walks up to him and says, sir, hey, just wanted to let you know something. You see out the window right over there? In fact, you have a window on this side. See those wings right there? Yeah. Do you see how all the rivets are popping off the wings right there? On that side too? And the man's like, whoa. He's like, yeah, we're just about 35,000 feet up. And when these wings come off, and they will, we're all going to die. The man's like, Really? He's like, yeah, we're all going to die. But here's the thing. Underneath your seat is what we like to call, it's an old term, but we like to call it a parachute. And say no more. He reaches in, puts this thing up, pulls it out, puts it over his shoulders, and he's sitting there in his seat, looking out the window, watching the rivets ping, 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 come off the sides. And he's holding on to this thing, and he's saying, thank you, Jesus, for my parachute. Thank you, Jesus, for my parachute. Thank you, Jesus, for my parachute. And he looks around, and all these people are like, why is this guy wearing his parachute? He's looking and said, listen, if I were you, I'd put on this parachute. You don't even know what's about to happen. You better get this thing on. And they're like, well, you're just kind of weird. His face is pressed up against the seat, but he doesn't care because he's so thankful that he's got a parachute on. He's like, thank God I've got this parachute. Lady walks by, craft of coffee, hits turbulence. The coffee comes up, lands on his lap. He says, man, that hurt. Thank God I got a parachute. This plane's going to crash. At least I don't get my lap burnt with coffee anymore. When's this thing going to go down? I can get off this flight so I can live. Those are two stories about tension. You see, I have a fear about the church of the 21st century that I battle with all the time. It's called a life-enhancing gospel. It's a gospel that goes something like this. If you were to have Jesus enter into your life will be better. That things will be great. That if you had financial problems, you accept the Lord, you're not going to have financial problems anymore. If you accept the Lord, I guarantee you your marriage will be out of this world. Intimacy will be taken care of. Your financial woes will be gone. Your kids will become doctors and Christian lawyers. And they'll be great. You'll have beautiful children, and you have 2.5 kids, a white picket fence, and you'll get to live on the west side of town, way up at Aubrey View. That if you have the Lord and you pray, and that sort of thing. And so, but all you got to do is just accept Jesus and come to church every Sunday. Make sure you tithe your 17%, and it'll be perfect. And for those of us that struggle, we're like, man, I could really use that. And so we buy into this gospel of self-enhancement. And what happens is we come to realize that this thing that we put on is not exactly the bill of goods that it was sold. For one day, life gets tough and life gets rough, and life has a way of spilling the proverbial hot coffee on our lap. And we get up and we say, you know what? To heck with this. I don't need this anymore. We throw it down. We cross our arms and say, I did the Jesus thing, I did the church thing, but it wasn't for me. I think out of the gates, friends, if we're going to talk about the resurrection, we need to understand something. The resurrection is for those of us that realize that we're all going to die. And yet, we have spirits that live for eternity. And the question this morning isn't about where we're going to go when we die. It's about where we're going to go when we're going to live for eternity. Rock bottom, none of us are going to die. None of you will die here today. Oh, this body of yours may give out, the heart quit, something will happen. But you and your spirit will live forever. But the great part is that understanding that we have an eternity that sits before us, it's great to know that we have something that determines where we're going to spend that eternity. Amen? And that even though this life of 70, 80 years, however long you're going to live, however long your dash is between your date of birth and your date of death, however long that dash is, that's just a small window compared to the eternity that we're going to be spending. And so I say that this morning because the resurrection, if we're going to talk about this idea of the power that comes with that hope, we have to understand there's tension. The tension is between this eternal spirit that God has placed inside of us way back in the garden and the temporal body and the temporal world that spirit lives in. See, that's the struggle. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11, Solomon says it. He says, he has made everything beautiful in its time. This is Solomon talking about the Lord. He has also set eternity, listen to this, he's also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. What Solomon says is that God has set eternity in our hearts. We know in our spirits that there's something about us that's going to live forever. The problem is we live in a world that isn't. We live in a body that doesn't. And that friction, that tension that we feel, that is what we call in the Bible defined as fear. Fear is the tension between the eternal that we live in and the temporal that we wrestle with. We struggle with it. We want things. We're afraid that things are going to go away. That's why we don't like change. Change reminds us that things that our eternal spirits have to deal with temporal things. I mean, we all want our names in the record books, right? I mean, you go to a funeral home, and I've been to a number of them, and I've sat with a number of people. They offer headstones, tombstones, headstones. And they say, well, this headstone will last 50 years or 100 years before it has to be replaced. People want the one that lasts the longest. I have yet to be, I just want one that lasts a couple weeks. You got one made out of Play-Doh? They don't do that. Why? Because there's something about us as we want to live forever in a temporal world, and that's the struggle, that's the fight. And because what's in that is fear, and that's why the resurrection defeats death. It defeats fear. So what I want to do this morning, I want to tell you two stories that come out of the Bible. One of them comes out of Mark chapter 5, and it reads something like this. Verse 35 is where we'll start. It says, while Jesus was still speaking, some men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. He said, your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, don't be afraid, just believe. Now, Luke actually Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record this story. Luke gives us a little bit of information before Mark does. And it says that Jairus had actually gone to Jesus and was pleading with him to heal his daughter. The context of this is Jesus, in Mark chapter 5, had been healing a bunch of people. The last person he healed was the woman with the issue of bleeding. And he just gets done telling her, hey, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. And right when he finishes that statement, Jairus, the synagogue ruler, bursts through the crowd, falls at Jesus' feet, and says, listen, Jesus, my daughter is dying. Please, he's pleading, please just come to my house and heal her. And in the midst of him pleading to Jesus, some of Jairus' friends show up and tap old Jairus on the shoulder and say, hey, Jairus, she's dead. She's dead. She just died. And Jairus. So they say to Jairus, it says, let me go on a bit farther. Verse 35, it says, your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, don't be afraid, just believe. It says here in the Luke account, it says, while Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, said, your daughter is dead, don't bother the teacher anymore. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. So it goes on in verse 37, he did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, and the brother of James. That is the brother of James. And when they came to the home of the synagogue ruler, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly, and he went and he said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. So he's there, he's before the Lord. He finds out that his daughter's dead. And what is Jesus' response to that news? What does he say? As he's watching Jairus get this bad news, what does Jesus say to Jairus? What does he do? He says, don't be afraid. Jesus ignores that information. He's like, listen, that's just the way they see it. That's just the way they see it. Don't listen to them. You believe. Don't be afraid. Believe. She's going to be healed. So Jesus grabs a few of his buddies, Peter, James, and John. The other 9 get left behind. I always feel like the other 9 get shafted most of the time. Like, what? You're always taking them. He's like, I like them more. And so he takes the 3, takes them into the house. And when he gets there, what's the atmosphere like in the house and around the house? What's going on at this house? What's happening? There's mourning, there's commotion, there's wailing, they're tossing ash in the air, there's people pulling their hair, people tearing their clothes. I mean, it's a mess. I mean, these people, it's a mess. Jesus walks in, and the first thing he says, all right, everybody out of the pool. Everybody out. Says, okay, let's stop the wailing, stop the crying. Listen. She's not dead. She's asleep. And what's their response to that? They just laugh at him. They mock him. It's not a laughter like, oh, that's a funny one. It's like, oh, you're an idiot. Where are you from? Nazareth? That explains it. All of them in Nazareth. He's like, yeah, whatever. Something like that. It sounded like that, except louder. That's perfect. So what happens is so he walks into the room, and he ushers everybody out, and we read this. After he put them out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and he went in where the child was, and he took her by the hand, and he said to her, Talith kum, which is Aramaic for little girl, I say to you, get up. And immediately the girl stood up and walked around. She was 12 years old. And at this they were completely astonished, and he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and told them to give her something to eat, which I like that at the end. He's like, listen, don't let her see dead. Look, she's all skin and bones. Get her a blizzard. Everybody gets a blizzard. Every resurrection gets a blizzard. I think that should be a rule of thumb. Okay, everyone that gets raised from the dead gets a blizzard. It's a small one, but it's a blizzard. So, anyways, he says to her, he says, listen, get up, walk. The parents are amazed. And then he gives them this information. Don't you find it even slightly curious? Hey, don't tell anybody about this. Everybody thinks she's dead. What am I going to tell them when I drop them off at school on Monday? I know we said she was dead, but she's really asleep. Listen, here's what Jesus does this a number of times, just as a side note. Jesus says that because he says, listen, I know you're going to want to try to explain this. Let the miracle speak for itself. You don't need to explain it. The miracle will speak for itself. All I'm asking you to do is don't try to explain why this happened or what happened. Oh, I lost my microphone. No wonder you were so excited. Everyone was like, can you hear me? So what happens here is that Jesus ultimately tells them, hey, let's just chill out. Just let this be. Let the miracle speak for itself. Just give her something to eat. Let's go about our lives. Let's go about our lives. Second story. Luke chapter 7. Now Luke 7 is it kind of sits on its own here. Luke chapter 7, verse 11. Soon afterwards, Jesus went to the town of Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. And as he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. And when the Lord saw her, listen to this, his heart went out to her, and he said, don't cry. And then he went up and he touched the coffin, and those carrying it stood still. And he said, young man, I say to you, get up. And the dead man sat up and began to talk. And Jesus gave him back to his mother. And they were all filled with awe, and they praised God. And they said, a great prophet has appeared among us. They said, God has come to help his people. This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. So the second story is another resurrection. This time Jesus is walking into the city of Nain. And you got to understand, people weren't buried in the city limits. They were buried outside the city. And so as the procession is going out of town, Jesus kind of meets them there right at the gate. And he sees this woman, and she's just in tears. She's crying, and there's this long train of people, and there's the coffin, and they're carrying the coffin. And Jesus says his heart went out to her. And he said, hey, let's just stop for a minute. Stop. And the people are like, well, there's a big train of people here. I mean, can you imagine? How many of you were at David Faircloth's memorial service? Some of you there? Anyways, it was a huge train. Can you imagine if somebody just walked out of the street, stop, this whole train of people, and just kind of knocks on the side of the hearse there? Hey, David. I mean, how many of us right there would say, what is this lunatic doing? But Jesus stops and he touches the side of the coffin. He says, listen to me, young man. You're alive. And it says, he sat up. Now let me tell you something. If you're a pallbearer and you're carrying that coffin and that lid flipped open and you saw this dude sit up, what would you do? Boom! I'm dropping it. I'm like, I don't know. This is a freak show. Woo! And he just gets up, and what's he start doing? He starts yapping. He starts talking. What do you think he talked about? Just curious. I mean, they don't say, well, what do you think he talked about?
Where's my blizzard?
Where's my blizzard? I heard about this whole blizzard thing. What else? I like that. That's what I'd be saying. What else? I mean, maybe what he saw, what he experienced. I imagine he sits up and he goes, you know what? I thought I was dead. Woo! And then he started talking. You know, I always find it says he started talking, and Jesus gave him to his mother. It's almost like he was yak, 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 yak. Jesus was like, okay. You take him. You take him. Go. You, Mom, go. Be on your way. As this guy starts yakking, and he just says his heart went out to him, and he saw her cry, and he's like, it's not supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to be like this. So what I want to do today, take these two stories, I just want to pull out a few points. We're going to have time next week, and then Easter Sunday, we're going to really wrap this up, this idea of the resurrection. But from these stories, there's a few things I want to pull out, all right? And I want to talk about what fear can do and what the resurrection does. Okay, what fear can do, how it can grip us, and what the resurrection provides for us. All right, this idea of resurrection. The first thing is this. When you take a look at these two stories, fear can grip us in, I just put 4 ways. Number 1, fear can smother our hearts with helpless despair. You know, if we begin to think that we only have 80 years to live on this earth, it's pretty much a life of despair. Every day is a bummer. Every day is a day where we try to get as much as we can. We look at our portfolio, we watch the stock market, we make sure that everything, we just gather in every day. And every day is another day that we're just like, oh. I was getting my hair cut last week and my hair was falling down, and I have this tendency whenever I get my hair cut to take a part of the hair and kind of rub it in my hand to see how much gray was there from the last time. Anybody else, do you do this other than me? Am I the only sicko in the group? So anyways, I kind of look at it. I'm like, man, there's more there than last time. And if I'm not careful, I begin thinking, I don't have as many days as I used to. And if you're not careful, fear can rise up pretty quick, doesn't it? The sense of, man, I got a lot of stuff I got to get done. I only have so many more days with my kids. If you're not careful, you can really get into a funk. And it can overwhelm you. These folks, they had no hope of the resurrection. And so poor Jairus and this poor woman, they're just overwhelmed. You see, the problem with an eternal spirit and a temporal world is there's a fear that rises up. And that fear has sometimes been labeled as the fear of becoming an orphan. And it doesn't necessarily mean we become like little kids that are abandoned, but we have that abandonment fear that's within us. I had to put my dog to sleep last Sunday after church. 12 years. I didn't want to see him go. And seeing something like that and a person leave you, there's that abandonment which creates that fear. And so if we're not careful, it can overwhelm us. And we can feel helpless. We may be powerless over it, but fear can get us to believe that we're helpless over it. Second thing, fear instills a don't bother mentality. Don't you find it interesting when Jairus comes up and he finds out that his daughter died, they say to him, hey, give it up. People die, things happen in this world, just let it go. Just don't bother. Don't bother anymore. We take on this fatalism mentality where it's like, you know what? I can't control this. I don't have any power over it. And so since I'm powerless, I'm just going to throw my hands up and believe that I'm just going to give myself over to the negativity of this world. I'm just not going to, and I hear it. Sometimes I've even fallen prey to it. It's like, I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to wear my seatbelt. I don't care what I eat. Friendships, I don't need them. They come and go. Why bother? Heck, the whole book of Ecclesiastes is a guy that's living out this life. Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Why even bother? If we're not careful, this fear overtakes us to such a degree that we just fall into this apathetic way of living where we just don't care anymore. And you know why we don't care? Rock bottom is because when we begin to care, there's a possibility we may be hurt. So don't be fooled by the idea, well, he doesn't care because he doesn't have any emotions. He doesn't have any feelings. Oh, that's not true at all. He's just insulated himself with this lack of apathy because deep down on the inside, you just don't want to have your heart broken one more time. You just don't want to have hurt get crushed again. The third thing fear can do is that it can cause us to have a disdain for hope. Someone starts talking about hope and we disconnect. Even now, talking like this, there are probably people in the room that's like, "Boop, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about hope." I had a friend just a couple weeks ago, he was talking about some things going on in his life, and I'm in this like a little men's group, and one of the guys in the group said, "Well, you know, there's a great time when I'm struggling, I get this like Philippians 4 where it says," and he quoted the passage, it says, "Don't be anxious about anything, but with prayer and petition with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God, and the God of peace that surpasses all understanding will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus." It's a beautiful passage, right? Well, I remember he said that, and the guy's response was, "I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that." You know, hope is a funny thing. It really creates vulnerability within us. And when we've been hurt, when we lose people in our life, when people leave us, if we're not careful, we begin to give up on hope. And if anybody has hope, we don't want to hear about it. You know, just, hey, listen, there's hope. I don't want to hear about your hope. You don't understand my problems. You don't understand my situation. My little girl just died, Jairus would say. Or this mom would say, my son, my only son just died. Don't give me Scripture. My problems are bigger than your passages of Scripture. And you know what we begin to die from? I've used this term before, but this is fitting to repeat it. We die from what's called terminal uniqueness. We believe that our problems are so great that even God's solutions don't apply to this situation. But the fact of the matter is, friends, is that it does. He does. But fear will cause us to think that there's no help, that we're just not going to bother, that hope is not something that we can have in our life anymore. Fear can grip us in a fourth way, and that is fear can overwhelm our senses and leave us an emotional mess. You just fall apart and you never get it. You never come back. You just tailspin. You know, the thing about this is really interesting. You can be in all four of these places and attend church every week. You can be in this place and be the nicest person in the workplace. You can be the most giving person at your charitable organization. But you know what you can't do? When you're in this place, it's impossible to worship. It's a struggle to sing. It's almost impossible to pray. We can attend and do this whole thing, but rock bottom, our hearts are a million miles away. And it's the tension between the eternal spirit that we have in us and the temporal that we're living in. So, now that's all the dark side of the moon, right? Should we talk about what the resurrection can do? That's all? Okay, good. Because it got really depressing there for a little bit, didn't it? All right. So, the great news is that these people didn't stay dead. So what does the resurrection provide? Here's what I love. Number one, when Jesus provides a resurrection, he provides a quietness to all the noise. Don't you love it when Jesus comes in? There's all this wailing, there's all this moaning, there's all this stuff, and Jesus says, all right, wait, time out. This has gotten out of hand. I understand we're sad, but we have lost our marbles here, friends. Listen, she's what? What does he say to her when he goes into the house? She's what? She's asleep. And what do they do in response to that? They laugh. You're ridiculous. He's like, no. You seem to think that your vantage point from being here on earth, seeing through temporal eyes, you seem to think you know what's going on. But the problem is you don't. All you see is a flesh, a dead person here. You don't understand. From my vantage point, from my father's vantage point, she's just asleep. David Fairclough, when we buried him last night, he's just asleep. He's not dead. I know some of you here might be saying, no, Mike, no, he's not. He's not dead. Now I'm going to give you a little look into my the cards on my chest here, kind of a thing. But I believe like my pets are going to be up in heaven. I don't know about your pets. Some of your pets I guarantee aren't going to heaven. I've met them, but I believe my pets are going to be in heaven. I do believe that. I believe there'll be animals in heaven. I believe in the new creation that they'll be there. In Jasper, I even have a tendency to believe I think they'll talk. Now, I'll tell you about that later, but I do think they'll sing. It does say that all creation will sing. So I do think they'll do something. And so I understand when I was talking with Jasper, when they put the sedation into him and they ultimately stuck in the blue fluid to stop his heart, I told him I'd see him again. My dog and David Bearclaw are hanging out together with all my other friends that have gone ahead of me. You see, Jesus sees it for what it really is. We only see it from the tension that we live within. That's why he says, no, listen, from my vantage point, it's just sleep. And watch this. Watch. He just says, watch this. I'll just take her by the hand and she gets up. Watch this. I'll just touch the side of the coffin. He'll get up. He says, you understand, for me, the way the reality is, the realness of it, is that's how it works. From death to life, from this world to the next, it's no more than waking up. You don't have to be afraid of death. That's why Jesus did resurrections here on earth, to give you a tangible look of what it's going to be like from this life to the next. It's just like waking up. You fall asleep when you open your eyes. Now, by the way, just a side note, for some of you that may be afraid I'm teaching a Jehovah's Witness sleep thing, no, I'm not doing that, okay? That's a totally different thing. All I'm telling you is that Jesus epitomizes in these stories how the resurrection gives us hope to know that the way we see things isn't the only way to be seen, and that the way God sees them is actually the most accurate way, which is you're never going to die. Listen to 1 Corinthians 15:55. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But Paul's quoting Hosea 13:14, which says, I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. Where, O death, are your plagues? Where, O grave, is your destruction? The writer says, listen, there's nothing to be afraid of because there is no more death. It's gone. 1 Thessalonians 4:13, this is a classic passage. Listen to this. Brothers, we do not want you to be ignorant about those who fall asleep or to grieve like the rest of men who have no hope. We believe, listen to this, we believe that Jesus died and rose again. And so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him. And according to the Lord's own words, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left till the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. And after that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever. Therefore, encourage each other with these words. Now, for some of you right now that are super excited, like you think I'm going to teach on the second coming, I'm going to bum you out. And that's not what I'm talking about here. But I will say this, because I think this is the point of what Paul's writing, is that, listen, when people die, when things happen, we don't grieve like the world does. Why? Because we believe in a resurrection. There's going to come a time where guys like David Fairclough and people that have, I just going through my head, a number of people that I've had the opportunity to be a part of their life and they've died. We're all going to get up and we're going to meet together. We're going to be with the Lord. And it's going to happen like that. To such a degree that I think that when I die, if I die before you, okay, when I get to heaven, you'll already be there. They may say, well, Mike, how's that possible if you died before us? Well, see, because we work on a linear thing, but heaven, all time gets wasted away, everything's in a heartbeat, we're all there. So even your loved one that dies before you, it's not like, well, they're lonely waiting for me to get there. Nope, in their mind, they're already there. And that's more real than you being here. Now, some of you, I just lost you. Just like a Matrix moment. They're like, okay. I give that to you for this. Just be encouraged. Be encouraged. We're in the resurrection. The resurrection tells us this. All right, that's the first thing. It provides a quietness to the noise. Secondly, there's a deep connection with our Father. There's a touch that Jesus makes. Listen to this. Listen to what Revelation tells us about what happens at this resurrection. He said in Revelation 7, he said, "These are they who have come out of the great tribulation," talking about us. "They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will spread his tent over them. Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat upon them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne, he will be their shepherd." You will never be an orphan. That's not in the text. I just want to put that in there. You will never be an orphan. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. He says in Revelation 21, he repeats this. He says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them, and he will be their God. And he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.' And he was seated on the throne." He says, "I am making everything new." Resurrection. Then he said, "Write this down, for these words, they're trustworthy and they're true." I want to tell you this morning that everything I just said to you is absolutely true. You will never die. And all this pain, and all this suffering, and all of the tension you feel every day when you wake up, I want you to know there is a hope in the resurrection. Every day you live, you're one day closer to realizing how true this really is. Do not despair at the day that the Lord takes you home. Is there anybody here that's like, "I want to take the iced tea plunge, the Nestea plunge. I'm ready to go today." Anybody takers? Anybody takers?